The Galactic Council chamber had seen many horrors in its 3,000-year history, but nothing quite prepared Ambassador Thelnara for the moment. A human delegation walked in carrying a silver case that dripped blue blood onto the pristine white floor. She watched from her observation pod, her 3 hearts hammering in her chest. As the lead human, a scarred woman named Captain Miranda Cross, placed the case on the central podium with deliberate care, her dark eyes scanning the assembled representatives with the calm of a predator who'd already won. "Inside this container," Miranda said, her voice echoing through the chamber's acoustic perfection, "is what remains of Tactical Officer Javara of the Caesarian fleet. She struck a 6-year-old human child named Emma Chen during a supply negotiation on Outpost Meridian. The child's arm was shattered in 3 places. She cried for her mother, while your officer laughed." The chamber erupted in chittering, buzzing, and various forms of alien outrage. But Thelnara couldn't tear her gaze from the human captain's face. There was no rage there, no satisfaction, just a cold, terrifying emptiness that made her scales prickle with ancient prey instinct. The container's seal hissed open, and Thelnara forced herself to look at Javara's severed head. The Caesarian's 4 eyes frozen wide in what must have been her final moment of understanding that humans were not the weak, soft species the galaxy had assumed. "This is an act of war." The Caesarian High Commander's voice boomed through his translator, his crest flaring crimson with fury, his massive form rising from his seat like a mountain gaining sentience. Miranda didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't show even a flicker of concern as she responded, "No, Commander Zechthel, this is a warning. War is what happens if any of you ever touch one of our children again." Thelnara's mind raced back to 3 cycles ago, when humans had first petitioned for council membership. How the chamber had buzzed with amusement at these bipedal mammals from a backwater world they called Earth. A death world by galactic standards, where the gravity alone would crush most species. Where the atmosphere was a corrosive oxygen mix. Where predators and prey had evolved in such brutal competition that everything from their bacteria to their weather systems seemed designed to kill. She remembered how Javara herself had been among the loudest voices of mockery, calling humans soft skins and gravity slaves, arguing they had no place among civilized species. The humans had been denied membership, relegated to trade post status, only treated as primitives who should be grateful for the galaxy's tolerance. Now, watching Commander Zechthel's face cycle through rage to calculation to something that looked disturbingly like fear, Thelnara wondered if the council had made a catastrophic miscalculation. "You murdered a decorated officer over a minor injury," Zechthel roared, but his crest was already fading to orange uncertainty. "Your species will face sanctions, blockades, total isolation from galactic commerce." Miranda's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, and Thelnara felt her temperature drop several degrees at the sight. "Commander, let me tell you what happened after your decorated officer broke a child's arm. Emma's father, David Chen, is a mining engineer, not a soldier, not a warrior. An engineer who spends his days calculating load stresses and safety margins. He heard his daughter scream from across the trading post. By the time station security arrived, Javara was missing 2 of her forearms, and David was standing over her with a plasma cutter in one hand and his daughter in the other. Station security, your people tried to arrest him. That's when things got interesting. The chamber had gone quiet. Now, that particular quality of silence that Thelnara had learned meant every species present was running threat assessment calculations through their various cognitive processes. She activated her personal recorder, some instinct telling her this moment would define the next era of galactic politics. Miranda continued, her voice never rising, never falling, maintaining that same conversational tone that somehow made her words more terrifying. 47 human civilians on that station, Commander. Accountants, teachers, traders, a retired couple running a noodle shop. Not one of them was military. Within 6 minutes of Javara's assault on Emma, they'd taken control of the entire station. Your security forces trained Caesarian warriors. Each one of them were disarmed, restrained, and locked in their own detention cells without a single fatality. The humans used mining equipment, kitchen knives, and in one case, a broken coffee mug. Thelnara pulled up the station footage on her personal display, something the council had suppressed from general distribution, and watched again as a human male in his 60s, the noodle shop owner, systematically dismantled 2 Caesarian guards using nothing but cooking oil. A hot pan, and an understanding of leverage that spoke to predator instincts honed over millions of years of evolution. We demand her return. Zechthel was standing now, all 8 feet of scaled muscle and military pride. David Chen will face Caesarian justice for his assault on David Chen, Miranda interrupted. And now there was heat in her voice, the first crack in that glacial composure. Sat by his daughter's bedside for 3 days while our doctors reconstructed her arm bone by bone. He hasn't slept more than an hour at a time. He has nightmares where he hears her screaming and he's not fast enough. He's a gentle man, Commander, the kind who cries at sad movies and volunteers at animal shelters. Your officer broke something in him when she broke his child. And we decided that was unacceptable. The use of we sent ripples through the chamber. And Thelnara understood why Miranda wasn't speaking as a rogue captain or even as a military representative. She was speaking as the unified voice of a species that had just announced itself as a collective threat. So you executed her, came a new voice. And Thelnara's attention shifted to Council Prime Velshara, the ancient ethereal who'd governed galactic law for centuries. Her translucent form shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep contemplation. Without trial, without due process, without consulting the very laws you seek to join, Miranda turned to face the ethereal, and for the first time, Thelnara saw something other than cold calculation in the human's eyes. She saw pain, and loss, and a weariness that seemed to age her a decade in the space of a heartbeat. Prime Velshara, with respect, we consulted your laws extensively. According to Galactic Code 7 Alpha 9, assault on a non-combatant during diplomatic proceedings is punishable by dismemberment and exile. According to Caesarian military law, striking an inferior species without provocation results in rank reduction and public censure. According to 17 different council precedents, humans have no legal standing to seek justice because we're not members. Which means Emma Chen's broken arm and trauma are, in your eyes, equivalent to someone kicking a pet. The accuracy of that assessment hung in the chamber like a poison cloud, and Thelnara watched several ambassadors shift uncomfortably in their pods. It was true the galaxy's legal framework had no category for humans beyond trade-approved non-members, which meant crimes against them existed in a gray area where prosecution was optional and rarely pursued. So we applied human law, Miranda said softly, and somehow that quiet voice carried more weight than Zechthel's roaring. We tried Javara in absentia, presented evidence from 43 different witnesses and 12 camera angles, allowed her to speak in her own defense via recorded statements. We found her guilty of assault on a minor with intent to cause severe harm. Her own words to station security were, I wanted to teach the soft-skinned brat a lesson about bothering her betters. The sentence, per Earth's unified justice code for crimes against children, is death. Thelnara felt a chill run down her spine. Not at the barbarity of the sentence, plenty of species had capital punishment, but at the implication that humanity had constructed an entire legal proceeding and carried out an execution in the time it had taken the council to even schedule a hearing on the incident. These weren't raging primitives acting on impulse. This was calculated, systematic, and terrifyingly efficient. You cannot simply impose your laws on council space. Velshara's patterns flickered red-orange, the ethereal equivalent of alarm. Miranda reached into her jacket, and Thelnara noticed at least 15 different species security personnel tense, hands moving to weapons, before the human simply pulled out a data tablet. We're not imposing anything, Prime. We're withdrawing. As of this moment, humanity is ceasing all trade negotiations, recalling all civilian personnel from council space, and closing our borders to galactic traffic. You wanted us isolated? You've got it. Earth and her 7 colonies are going dark. We'll revisit contact in, say, 50 years. Maybe by then the galaxy will have decided whether hitting our children has consequences. The chamber exploded not figuratively but literally, as dozens of species began shouting, projecting holographic protests. And in the case of the methane-breathing Drexnel, releasing clouds of pheromone-based outrage that triggered environmental alarms. Thelnara's analysis processor was overwhelmed trying to calculate the economic impact of humanity's withdrawal in just 3 years of limited trade. Human novelties had become luxury items across 17 sectors. Their music and entertainment had developed cult followings. Their food had inspired entire fusion cuisine movements. And their manufacturing techniques had improved efficiency in countless industries. The loss wouldn't cripple the galaxy, but it would be felt. And it would raise uncomfortable questions about why the council had allowed this situation to deteriorate. But Thelnara's attention wasn't on the chaos. It was on Miranda Cross, who stood perfectly still amid the storm, waiting. She was waiting for something, Thelnara realized. And that's when she noticed the other 3 humans in the delegation had positioned themselves at the chamber's cardinal points, not threateningly, but with clear tactical awareness of sight lines and exit vectors. Enough. Valshera's voice carried the psychic weight of prime authority, and the chamber fell silent with the instant obedience of species who'd evolved under her guidance. Captain Cross, your species has made its position clear. However, you must understand that this action executing a council officer cannot go unanswered. If we allow it to stand without response, the entire framework of galactic law collapses. Miranda nodded slowly, as if she'd expected this. What response did you have in mind, Prime? Surrender yourself for trial, Velshara said, her bioluminescence shifting to the soft blue of judicial consideration. You, as the ranking human official present, will stand accused of murder, conspiracy, and violation of council sovereignty. If acquitted, humanity's actions may be deemed justified self-defense. If convicted, you'll face the appropriate penalties. And humanity can seek council membership through proper channels. With this matter resolved, Thelnara's breath caught it was a trap. Obviously, a legal maneuver to put humanity on trial by proxy through their captain. But it was also an elegant solution that might satisfy honor on both sides. She found herself leaning forward in her pod, desperate to hear Miranda's response, and was startled to realize she was hoping the human would refuse, would spit in the council's face and walk out, even though that would almost certainly lead to the war commander Zechthel had threatened. When had she started rooting for the Deathworlders? I accept, Miranda said, and the shock that rippled through the chamber was almost physical. On 3 conditions. Velshera's patterns flickered with what might have been surprise or approval. Ethereals were notoriously hard to read. Speak your conditions, Captain. First, the trial happens immediately, within the next planetary rotation. No delays, no continuances, no procedural delays while I sit in a cell for months. Agreed. Second, the trial is broadcast on all council channels, unedited, with full access given to human observers. Transparency Prime, something I understand the council values highly. Thelnara caught the slight sarcasm in that last phrase, a gentle reminder of the council's frequent closed-door dealings. But Velshara simply pulsed acknowledgement. Agreed. And third, Miranda's expression hardened into something that made Thelnara's predator detection instincts scream. If I'm convicted, humanity still withdraws and goes dark permanently this time. If I'm acquitted, the council issues a formal apology to Emma Chen and her family, grants humanity full membership status, and implements new protocols protecting all children regardless of species or membership status with enforcement mechanisms that have actual teeth. Oh, and Commander Zechthel personally delivers the apology to Emma, in person, unarmed, on Earth. The chamber erupted again, but Zechthel himself had gone perfectly still, his crest flat against his skull in an expression Thelnara had only seen once before. When a Caesarian warrior recognized they'd been outmaneuvered by a superior tactician, Miranda had just turned a trial into a referendum on the council itself, on the value of human life, on the protection of children, framing it in terms that made refusing look monstrous while accepting meant acknowledging humans as equals. It was brilliant, and Thelnara felt a warmth in her chest that she recognized with some surprise as admiration. The trial lasted 8 hours, and Thelnara watched every minute from her pod, unable to look away even as her shift ended and her replacement arrived. The prosecution, led by a sharp-minded Queltari jurist named Sivaresh, presented a damning case. Miranda had ordered Javara's execution, had commanded the human force that extracted her from Caesarian custody, had personally witnessed the sentence being carried out. The evidence was undeniable, presented in crisp detail with video logs, communication intercepts, and testimony from 17 witnesses. Miranda's defense attorney, a human male named James Park who'd specialized in interspecies law despite humanity's non-member status, didn't dispute a single fact. Instead, he did something Thelnara had never seen in a council court. He put the council itself on trial. Let me show you something, Park said, projecting an image that made Thelnara's 3 hearts clench. It was Emma Chen, a tiny human child with dark hair and enormous brown eyes. sitting in a hospital bed with her arm in a regeneration cast, and she was crying, not sobbing, but quiet tears that tracked down her cheeks while she stared at nothing. "This is what trauma looks like," Park said softly. "Emma doesn't sleep through the night anymore. She flinches when anyone approaches her right side, where Javara struck her. She's 6 years old, and she's afraid of aliens now, afraid of the stars she used to beg her parents for stories about. Officer Javara didn't just break her arm. She broke her sense of safety, her trust, her childhood wonder." He pulled up another image, this one of Javara's service record, and highlighted a section in red. This wasn't Officer Javara's first incident. She had 17 formal complaints from non-member species traders, 12 for excessive force, 3 for use of racial slurs, 2 for theft of goods from merchants she deemed inferior. All 17 complaints were dismissed without investigation because, according to Council protocol, non-member species lack standing to bring charges against Council officers. "My question to this court is simple. How many Emmas will there be if we don't draw a line? How many broken children, traumatized families, shattered innocence before someone says enough?" The gallery, normally restrained and formal, had grown increasingly uncomfortable, and Thelnara noticed several junior ambassadors openly accessing Javara's file, their expressions shifting as they discovered what Park had revealed was not only true but actually understated. "The defense," Sivaresh countered sharply, "is attempting to justify murder through emotional manipulation. No one disputes the assault was wrong, but the response was disproportionate." Disproportionate? Park's voice cracked like a whip. The first time he'd raised it, and the shock of volume made half the chamber flinch. A decorated military officer trained in 17 forms of combat chose to attack an unarmed child. She could have ignored Emma. She could have asked her to leave. She could have called for the child's parents. Instead, she put her full strength, enhanced by military-grade augmentation, into a strike meant to cause maximum pain and injury. The disproportion, prosecutor, was in the initial assault, not the response. Velshera's patterns had gone completely neutral, white, unreadable as she asked, "Attorney Park, does humanity believe that capital punishment is the appropriate response to assault?" "No, Prime," Park said, and his voice softened again into something that sounded like genuine regret. "We believe capital punishment is the appropriate response to someone who violates the sacred trust owed to children, who demonstrates through word and deed that they enjoyed causing that child pain, and who operates within a system that has demonstrated it will never hold them accountable otherwise." Javara didn't just assault Emma. She laughed while doing it, called her a pest that needed swatting, and told station security that non-members should keep their spawn on a tighter leash. She felt entitled to hurt a child, safe in the knowledge that the Council's laws would protect her. Humanity decided to prove her wrong. Thelnara found herself reviewing the case files with new eyes, and what she saw disturbed her deeply. Javara's pattern of behavior was extreme but not unique, and the system's failure to address complaints from non-member species had created a class of effectively untouchable officers who'd learned they could act with impunity. Park wasn't wrong. There would be more Emmas if nothing changed, and the thought made her feel physically ill. The Council's deliberation lasted 37 minutes, and when Velshara returned to her podium, her patterns were a complex mix of colors that Thelnara's translation implant struggled to parse. "This court finds Captain Miranda Cross guilty of execution without Council authority," Velshara said, and Thelnara's heart sank even as she saw Miranda's expression remain unchanged, as if she'd expected nothing different. "However, we also find that said execution was performed in defense of a minor child, in response to an assault that existing Council protocols failed to adequately address, and in accordance with the legal framework of the accused's own species, in absence of applicable Council law. Therefore, the sentence is time served, and Captain Cross is free to go." The chamber exploded for the third time that day. But Velshara wasn't finished. "Furthermore, this court orders the following. First, an official apology from the Kassarian fleet and the Council itself to Emma Chen and her family. Second, humanity is granted probationary Council membership, with full membership pending successful completion of a 2-year integration period. Third, the Council shall form an immediate committee to establish protections for all children in Council space, regardless of species or membership status, with enforcement authority vested in a new multi-species agency. And fourth, her patterns locked onto Commander Zechtel with laser focus. Commander Zechtel will personally deliver the Caesarian apology to Emma Chen on Earth, as Captain Cross requested. Consider it a diplomatic mission, Commander, and an opportunity to understand the species you so thoroughly underestimated. Thelnara couldn't breathe. The council had not only acquitted Miranda but had granted nearly every demand she'd made, had essentially admitted that their system was flawed and needed reform, had elevated a non-member species to probationary status in a single trial. It was unprecedented, revolutionary, and absolutely terrifying in its implications for the existing power structure. And Miranda Cross, standing there in the center of the chamber with her silver case and her terrible cargo, simply nodded once and said, "Thank you, Prime." Humanity accepts these terms. Thelnara made a decision then that would change her life. She left her observation pod, activated her personal communicator, and sent a message to the Council Prime's private channel, Prime Velshara Ambassador. Thelnara requesting assignment to the Human Integration Committee. I believe my expertise in multi-species cultural analysis would be valuable, and I wish to help ensure this transition succeeds. The response came back within seconds. Approved. Report to Earth Embassy tomorrow. Try to survive the gravity, Ambassador. Thelnara allowed herself a small smile at the ethereal's dry humor, then made her way down to the chamber floor, where the human delegation was preparing to leave. She approached Miranda carefully, aware that she was a predator species addressing a prey species, except somehow those roles felt reversed right now. Captain Cross, she said, her translator, rendering her whistling clicks into standard. I wanted to say, what you did was terrifying, but it was also necessary. The council has grown complacent, and we forgot that our laws are supposed to protect the vulnerable, not shield the powerful. You reminded us, painfully, but necessarily. Miranda studied her with those dark human eyes, and Thelnara forced herself not to look away, to meet that gaze, even though every instinct screamed at her to flee. Then, slowly, the human's expression softened into something that might have been genuine warmth. Ambassador Thelnara, is it? I appreciate that, truly. What we did wasn't about revenge, though I know it looked that way. It was about making sure that the next time a human child reaches out to touch an alien's hand in friendship, they don't get broken for their curiosity. Emma loved aliens, you know. She had stuffed toys of 17 different species. She used to practice writing hello in 6 different languages. And one casual moment of cruelty from someone who should have known better took that away from her. Thelnara felt wetness on her face and realized with some surprise that she was crying, her body releasing stress hormones through her tear ducts in a response that remarkably humans shared. I've been assigned to your integration committee, she said quietly. I'd like to help make sure Emma's generation grows up in a galaxy worth their wonder. Miranda extended her hand, and Thelnara knew enough about human customs to recognize the gesture. She reached out her own 3-fingered hand and felt the warm, strong grip of the human captain's handshake. Then let's build that galaxy together, Ambassador, Miranda said. And for the first time since entering the chamber, she smiled a real smile, not the cold expression from before. And it transformed her face into something almost gentle. Fair warning though, humans can be stubborn, loud, emotional, and we have very strong opinions about protecting children. Any children. All children. I'm starting to think that's exactly what the galaxy needs, Thelnara replied. 3 months later, she stood in a hospital room on Earth, fighting against gravity that made her bones ache and air that burned her lungs with its oxygen richness. Watching as Commander Zechtel knelt before a tiny human child and spoke words of apology in carefully practiced English. Emma Chen, her arm fully healed, but her dark eyes still wary, listened to the towering Caesarian warrior explain that what Officer Javara had done was wrong, that he was sorry, that the Caesarian people valued strength, but true strength meant protecting those weaker, not harming them. And then Emma did something that made Thelnara's 3 hearts simultaneously clench and soar. She reached out and patted Zechtel's scaled hand with her small, fragile fingers and said, "It's okay. You're not scary like she was. You have kind eyes." The commander, who'd commanded fleets in 17 campaigns and never shown weakness, had to pause and clear his throat several times before he could continue. And Thelnara watched as something fundamental shifted in his expression. He finally understood what humanity had been trying to tell the council. That children were not just small adults, but repositories of possibility. beings who deserve protection not because they were valuable to their species' future, but because they were inherently precious in their vulnerability and hope. When Thelnara filed her integration report that night, fighting exhaustion from the gravity and atmospheric differences, she wrote a single line that she knew would be quoted in council chambers for generations. Humanity didn't teach us to be cruel. They taught us that there are some lines that, once crossed, reveal who we truly are as civilized beings. And protecting children, all children, is the line that separates civilization from barbarism. The report was approved unanimously. And 2 years later, when humanity's probationary period ended and they were granted full council membership, the vote wasn't even close. Ambassador Thelnara stood beside Captain Miranda Cross, now Admiral Miranda Cross, humanity's first representative to the Council Military Commission, and watched as Emma Chen, now 8 years old and still possessing more courage than seemed possible in such a small frame, activated the holographic display that showed the new Child Protection Agency's logo, a human child's hand held gently in an alien's grasp, with the motto "Never Again" written in 47 languages underneath. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and the price had been paid in blue blood and broken innocence. But as Thelnara watched Emma laugh at something, Admiral Cross whispered to her. She thought perhaps the cost, terrible as it was, had purchased something invaluable, a future where wonder didn't have to come with fear, where reaching across the stars meant connection rather than danger, where every child, human, Caesarian, ethereal, or any of the hundreds of species in council space, could sleep safely knowing that the galaxy itself had promised to protect them. And unlike before, that promise now had teeth.